The project I'm making here features the alphabet a la mode dies, which are these wonderful letter dies. And we're using this Celebration Designer Series paper. It's the Dainty Flowers Designer Series paper. It's just gorgeous. So many beautiful patterns in this. And we're going to be using several in the pack. Now we're going to be doing a variation of this card. We'll be doing either thank or love, and then you here instead of happy birthday. So to get started, I've got this little itty bitty piece of crushed curry, and we're going to be heat embossing that using just the U from this image. This stamp comes from the Happy Labels stamp set, and we are using just the portion right there. So I'm going to start by tapping my embossing buddy on my crushed curry piece. I've got my Versamark ink pad, and I am just going to only ink up the portion that is the U. Now, if you're worried about getting ink on the thank portion, you can grab a small Post-it note, and when you're inking it up, just cover the thank like that, and then just ink it up that way. And the thank will be covered for you. And then remove it, and you'll stamp this little image on your crushed curry piece. So of course you'll need to go into your stash and find an image of the word you to stamp on that little piece, or of course you can mix it up and do something different with what you have on hand. Now this is so tiny that I'm going to be using this little tweezers, and it holds on to it just like that, so that I can dip it into the powder, tap off the excess, and then I'll just go ahead and heat emboss this. Now for these dies, I have taken pieces of cardstock and I've put some adhesive sheets on the back, so it's super easy for you to use the pieces I've sent you. And you'll just, I have taken my letters and positioned them on a piece of press and seal to keep them in place so that I could do this multiple times, and participants who were here with me could do it easily and get those words in place. By doing it this way and die cutting it out like that, you'll have the choice to use either the letters that you die cut out or the negative space piece. And here's an example of the thank done where you'd use the negative space piece. So to get started with this, we've got a card base. This is Orchid Oasis, and there are 3 different color schemes. And you would have gotten 2 out of the 3 color schemes in your kit. Okay, next I'm going to work on assembling my sentiment piece. Now, you got a variety of pieces in your kit, and you can either choose to use this negative space or the actual letters, the positive space that comes out of them. For this one, I actually, I put dimensionals on the back. I like to use dimensionals on these negative space pieces. And your piece, of course, if you decide to use the negative space, will have an adhesive sheet covering the back side, kind of like this one. So if you decide you want to use the negative space, you want to pop it up, you'll just remove the backing, just like that I have, add your dimensionals, and then while the backings are still on the dimensionals, you want to tap it with an embossing buddy, and that will remove the stickiness from the areas around it. That way your piece won't press down where that adhesive is and be irregular, so some popped up and some not. So that's kind of an important little detail. And you'll want to make sure to save and not lose the little pieces that go into the negative space as well. And there's a really small one that goes with in the thank, the little tiny portion in the inside of the A, and that little inside portion would go with the negative space piece. So just make sure to keep an eye on that if you want to use that little piece. All right, so we're going to take this and position it on our designer paper where we want it. I have adhesive on the back side of this designer paper, so it's on this release sheet here. It won't stay there when we're done. I'm going to justify my love to the left side a bit. And I've got my little U piece here, and I'm going to put that kind of down below. So we'll go ahead and press that down onto the vellum. And then I've got the inside of my O to put into the center. And then I'm going to place this piece down at the bottom with just about an 1/8 inch or maybe more overlap right there. Now this piece is longer than you're going to want it in the end, so I'm doing this step first and then we'll trim off the excess. So on my heat embossed U, I'm going to actually put some dimensionals on the back side so that it's raised up like the love is. And I'm just going to place it here off to the right so that it's straddling the vellum and covering up the sentiment at the corner. Now it's the U is holding the whole thing together. So what I'm going to do on the back side is add some adhesive to my designer paper piece. And then I'm going to put some adhesive in strategic spots where it will be hidden behind the vellum. So I'm going to use my multi-purpose liquid glue and just put some spots where I know it'll be hidden. Adhesive will show through the vellum if I don't put it in places that will be hidden. Now I'm going to let that dry just a bit because that's a big glob of glue and it will probably ooze out and then it'll show through. So I'm not going to do that quite yet. So I'm going to show you a couple of other things. Now for this version, I'm doing it on the Old Olive and Mossy Meadow. And again, you can choose to use either the negative space or the actual letters. Now I'm going to use the actual letters on this one, but I want to show you a trick that you can do that's really helpful in getting your placement. So I'm going to use this as a guide for where to put my letters. And so I'm going to start by just removing the backings of each letter one at a time. And then I'm just going to place it right into the opening and press it down. And then I'm just going to do that with each of the remaining letters. Now again, I'm going to poke out that center of the A, set it aside so I can use it with the negative space at some other time. You can also use take your pick tool or paper piercing tool to lift up those backings to make it a little bit easier. And then all you have to do is remove the negative space piece and reveal your letters. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this as I did with the last one. Getting my pieces in place. And for this one, I'm going to use glue dots instead of dimensionals. And I think it's going to be a little bit easier if I put adhesive on this first using my silicone craft sheet. I can just place it right down on the silicone craft sheet and it won't stick, but it stays in place so I can have it in position exactly where I want it. I could put it here on top of the thank if I wanted to. You can put it wherever you want. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is put some multi-purpose liquid glue on the back of each of the letters. And then I'm going to let it dry. So now I'm going to set that aside for a few minutes. All right. So there's the back of this one. I may just dab up a little bit of the excess on that big glob. Make sure it doesn't ooze out. And then I can decide where I want to put this piece on my designer paper. All right, and then I'm just going to snip off this piece on the side. Holding it this way, I can just snip it off holding my scissors against the edge of the designer paper. And I'm going to go ahead and attach these pieces together. And there you go. I've got another version that I'm doing on Blackberry Bliss. This is my Blackberry Bliss and Rich Razzleberry. We'll remove the backings of those. Attach that piece. Now this piece I've done with Love You. And I put adhesive on the back side of the letters. You can see it's shiny, but it's not white, which means it's dry. I can even put my finger against it. And of course now I can just go ahead and attach it to my designer paper. Now on this one, my vellum doesn't quite go to the edge, so I'm going to trim that off just a little bit. And at the same time, I just trimmed off the rest of my green strip as well. And there you go. There are my 3 versions of this card. Have fun playing with the pieces in your kit, whether you use the negative space or the positive space. And let me know if you have questions. This project uses the Country Floral Lane product suite from the January to April mini catalog. There are 2 designer series papers, some embellishments, ribbon. We will not be using the stamp set that goes with this suite, but we will be using this Celebrating You stamp set and the hand-drawn dots. This one is also in the mini catalog. And we'll also be using these layering circles dies. So there are 3 different versions of this card. Because the designer papers have a range of colors in them, so I designed 3 different layouts. These are the first 2. We'll be making the 3rd one together. So to get started, I have a piece of mint macaron cardstock here. It has a backing on it because I've got adhesive already on this piece. I've got my hand-drawn dots stamp, and I'm going to be inking it up with Versamark. And then I'm just going to be stamping this background onto the mint macaron. Now this is a really big block, so if you want to, you can also take your piece, put it face down, and then just rub over the surface. Whatever option you're comfortable with. And then I'm also going to be stamping this same image as a background on my sentiment piece. Now this sentiment piece is stamped with Night of Navy ink on a piece of balmy blue cardstock. I've already stamped it, and I do have adhesive on the back side. I'm going to go ahead and just place this down where I want it, and I'm going to go in here where there's some more delicate dots, and this is just going to create a little bit of a background on my sentiment piece. So we're going to go ahead and take our white card body, and I'm going to attach this stamped piece onto it. Now there is a banner piece that goes on this card, and you can either use this Banner's Pick-a-Punch, or you can hand do it. If you use the punch, if you have it, you'll just be taking your piece of cardstock or designer paper and sticking it right in there and just punching it out. This is sized to give you the right length when you're done. And the other option is to simply create your own banner with the scissors. And the easy way to do that is just to snip up a line in the center and then come in from the points to get an even shaped banner. So there's my finished banner. And on this card, I actually used the banner pick-a-punch. You can see it's almost identical. But you can make it, you can make the banner deeper if you want, if you're using a scissors. If you're using the punch, you just, you get what you get. Then I've got a piece of Mossy Meadow cardstock. It has adhesive on the back, so I've got a backing there, and a piece of the Designer Series paper. I think this is my favorite pattern in the set. Love those little bicycles. And then I'm just going to go ahead and attach this to the front of the card. And I want to just make sure to leave a little room at the top for my embellishments. And it's kind of centered top to bottom. This amount of space is about the same amount as that. And then I can assemble my sentiment piece. So for this version, I've got a piece of mint macaron cardstock, just a small little strip. And I've got some adhesive on the back at the very bottom. So I can just place that onto there. Sort of like a little underline, if you will. And then I'm going to tie a ribbon. Now, on these versions, I use the red ribbon and then this burlap ribbon. That's a combo pack of ribbon that you get with the Country Floral Lane suite. And you can also see I've used a different strip color underneath each of the sentiments just to go with each particular design. So now for this version, I'm using baker's twine and just going to create some ears, if you will, with the baker's twine. I've got it doubled up, so that's 2 pieces of baker's twine there. Now I like to use 2 pencils to put into the ears, and it gives me a little bit more control about how I shape the bow. I can pull the tails, I can then adjust the size of the ears, and I can also hold on to the knot there and just pull down in the center to sort of train my tails, if you will. You can make that bow as little or as big as you want. Now when I stamped my sentiment, I stamped it so that it was justified a little bit up from the center so that I'd have room down at the bottom to put the bow and it wouldn't get in the way of the sentiment. Well, I'm going to take some multi-purpose liquid glue and find out where I want to put this, get my placement. And I'm going to put just a little dot of glue onto my sentiment piece. Now I'm going to let that dry just a bit so that it's tacky and doesn't ooze. And the bow will stick a little bit better to it that way. And then I'm just going to snip off those ends. It should be about right. While that's drying just a little bit, I'm going to put on my embellishments. So for this one, I can choose which embellishments I want. I can either go with the gold or these ones in here, the blue ones. Let's just see what it looks like. Let's try the blue. I think I like the blue. All right. There we go. Now, I'm going to put dimensionals on the back side of this. Probably should have done it before I put the white glue on there, but just have to hold it up while I do it, making sure not to touch that glue at the bottom. And we'll go ahead and place this down on the card where I want it. Now, you can place it anywhere you want. This one I justified a little bit lower than this one. This one, all of it is pretty much on the designer paper panel, hanging off a little bit on the right. And this one, I justified it down so it's hanging off on the bottom and on the right. So let's see where I want this one. And let's go ahead and put the bow on. That white glue is still a little bit oozy, but I think it should be fine. We'll just press it right onto there. Pull my tails down. And then if you want, you can take something heavy like an acrylic block and just place it down onto the bow to get that to stick and stay in place. Or you can just leave it sitting there air drying. Here's a small block to put on there. And there you go. So each kit will include some ribbon. I will leave it up to you to choose your own embellishments to put up in the upper left-hand corner. You could use pearls, regular rhinestones, or any one of the things that I've used. I hope you enjoy making this project. All right, next we're going to be making a slight variation of this card, and it is made with the ginkgo branch stamp set and coordinating dies and some other things. This is an easel card, so it stands up. There's a little bumper on this inside piece that allows it to tuck up against it and stand up. Simple but fun. Now the variation we're doing is slightly different. This one actually uses tissue paper as a layer on top of a piece of white. Ours is going to be a little bit simpler, and we will not be using the tissue paper. You can choose to add that if you wish. And here's a look at all the die cut pieces in the ginkgo branch dies. So we're going to start with heat embossing our inside sentiment piece. That's this piece right here. And that image does come from the ginkgo branch set. We'll just tap this with our embossing buddy and stamp it with some Versamark. And then I'm going to heat emboss in gold. Now this tool right here comes in handy for picking this up and holding it. It pinches onto the paper without actually having to hold onto it and squeeze it. Next, we'll get started with our stamping. I'm going to be using this large ginkgo image with the Mango Melody ink pad. And then I'm going to come in with one of these other leaf images with my crushed curry. You can see here I made a little boo-boo. Stamped off the page. The ink comes off the stamp in a different way when you do that. So I got this little line. So I'm going to try to go over it, see if I can fix that, just by doing full ink in that spot. Now I'm pulling in the third leaf image from this set with my soft suede ink. You could also use black, since we will be bringing some black die cuts into this design. I'm stamping them each at slightly different heights, and I did it again. Oh my goodness. Now I've got my jet black stays on, and I'm going to be using this little bird image from the Waves of Inspiration. You could also use a black marker and draw little birds in if you don't have this stamp. Now you could stop right here with your stamping, or you can add some additional color. Now here's the one I just stamped in this version. The colors do show up a little bit different on the tissue paper. A little bit more orangey for the Mango Melody here, a little less so on this one. So I'm going to actually add some color to this. I'm going to grab my Tahitian Tide and add a little bit of sky, or some blue to the sky, taking off the first layer so they don't get something splotchy on there. And then I'm going to add a few greens to the ground. Got my Parakeet Party here, one of the 2022-24 in colors. And then some of my garden green. And I'm going to focus this darker color towards the edge and the bottom. So here's the one I just did, and here's one that I did earlier that's does not have the color on it, so you can decide which one you prefer. Now we're going to be using this black die cut piece over the top. I've poked out all the pieces that come out. These are all solid and have some dry embossed elements on them. And on the back I've got my black Stampin' Dimensionals to pop up the top portion. And on the bottom I'm going to add a little bit of white glue to have the stems fused flat on the bottom of this stamped piece. Now I am going to be cutting off some of the bottom. I won't be using this whole shape. I'm going to put glue on more than I'll probably need glue on, so that I make sure that it's all the way at the bottom of whatever I'm going to have attached to the focal piece. I like to let that white glue dry. You'll know it's dry when it's clear and no longer white. And I have done one that I've prepared already and allowed it to dry off camera. And I've removed the backings from my dimensionals as well on this piece here, so you can see the glue is clear and dry at the bottom. So I'm going to grab my silicone craft mat, because the back of this is going to be sticky and some of it's going to hang off the edge. And I'm just going to figure out my placement of where I want this shape to be. And on my original card, it's hanging off the side of the black and then some onto the card base as well. So I'm going to do that in a similar way here. And then just tack it down and press it down at the bottom where that white glue was. And then I'm going to go ahead and just turn that over and trim off the excess. Now this is the one I stamped, but I had done it on the back side also, and I kind of like the back side better. So I decided to attach my die cut piece to the previously stamped images instead. All right, so now I'm going to assemble this card. I've got a black base for it. This already has adhesive on the back side, the black piece. And I'm just going to go ahead and add some adhesive on the back of my focal piece. And I'm just attaching this to a piece of So Saffron cardstock. And then I've got my card base here. This piece is 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2, and well, 2 3/4 and 5 1/2. And I'm just going to fold it in. So I'm creating a mountain fold. And I've got adhesive on this panel at the bottom. This piece is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It's the same size as the front of the card, and it's just going to get attached right over the top. This is going to create the easel. So just like that, and it's going to fold up like that. And then the piece I've assembled previously puts right on the top. Okay, so let's create our bumper on the inside. And for this, I've got a piece of white to write your note and to put the sentiment. And this piece has dimensionals on the back. The backings have already been taken off. And the dimensionals on this layer are very important because they serve as the bumper to hold the easel card up. And that's just going to get justified towards the bottom with an even edge on the bottom, left side and right side. And then we've just got our sentiment here. And I'm going to use a couple glue dots to attach it. And there we go. So here's the version with my tissue paper, without the added color in the sky and the ground, and of course the one with the color. I hope you've enjoyed this card. Have fun making it.